cameras caught it all. The exact moment Catherine Middleton's hand trembled as she reached for the car door. November rain hammered against the black umbrella held above her head. Flashes exploded like lightning. Hundreds of voices shouted her name, but not the name she'd carried her whole life. They were calling her something else now. Something that made her chest tighten. Princess Catherine. Over here? She wasn't a princess yet. The engagement had been announced only hours ago. But already the world had decided who she would become, whether she was ready or not. Inside the vehicle, William reached across and squeezed her hand. His touch was warm, steady. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that frightened her more than the cameras. He believed in her, completely. He thought she could handle this. Catherine wasn't so sure, before you hear what happened next. If you love real stories about courage and transformation, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The palace gates closed behind them with a heavy clang. That sound would stay with her forever. It felt like a door shutting on her old life. On the girl who grew up in Berkshire, the girl who worked at her parents' party supply business, the girl who could walk down a street without bodyguards. That girl was gone now. You were brilliant out there, William said, still holding her hand. Catherine said nothing. She'd barely spoken 3 words to the press. Her voice had caught in her throat. The ring on her finger felt impossibly heavy. It had belonged to his mother, Princess Diana, the most photographed woman in the world. The woman the public had adored. The woman who had died running from cameras, and now Catherine was supposed to wear her ring. The car pulled up to a side entrance. William helped her out, and they walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Paintings of queens stared down at her. Women in jewels and crowns. Women who had been born for this, trained for this. Catherine had a university degree in art history. She'd met William in college. She thought they'd have a normal relationship. Maybe get married quietly someday. Have a small wedding. But there was nothing small about marrying the future. King of England. They reached a private sitting room. William's father was waiting. Prince Charles stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He turned when they entered. His expression was unreadable. "Catherine," he said. Not Kate. Never Kate. That name was too common for what she was becoming. "Sir," she managed. "We need to discuss your training," Charles continued. "The protocol office has prepared a schedule. Voice coaching, etiquette review, public speaking. You'll need to master it all before the wedding. 6 months. That's all the time she had. William's hand found hers again. But this time, it didn't comfort her, because she realized something in that moment. Something that made her blood run cold. He couldn't protect her from this. Nobody could. Asterisk, asterisk. The training started the next morning at 7 o'clock. Sharp Catherine stood in front of a mirror. In a room she didn't recognize, a woman named Margaret circled her like a hawk, studying prey. Margaret had trained 3 generations of royals. Her eyes missed nothing. "Your posture," Margaret said. "You're slouching." Catherine straightened her spine. She'd always thought she had good posture. "Your hands. Don't fidget." Catherine hadn't realized she was fidgeting. "When you sit, knees together. Always. Even when you're tired. Even when you think no one is watching. Someone is always watching." The sessions lasted for hours. Then came voice coaching. Then etiquette training. Then briefings on charities, organizations, protocols she'd never heard of. By evening, Catherine's head pounded. Her feet ached from standing in heels. Her face hurt from holding a smile. William found her in the garden after dinner. She was sitting on a bench in the dark, still wearing the dress they'd made her practice in. She'd been too exhausted to change. "How was it?" he asked gently. Catherine laughed, but it came out wrong. Sharp, almost bitter. "They want to change everything about me," she said. "The way I walk. The way I talk. the way I hold a teacup. They even corrected how I breathe. William sat beside her. I know it's hard, do you? The words escaped before she could stop them. You were born into this, William. You've had trainers your whole life. I'm trying to learn in 6 months what you had 20 years to practice. Silence fell between them. The kind that feels heavy. You're right, William said finally. I don't know what this is like for you, but I do know something. Turned to face her. My mother went through this too. They tried to mold her into what they thought a princess should be. And you know what? She struggled. She felt like she was losing herself. Catherine's throat tightened. She knew where this story ended. But William continued. She also found her own way. She became the people's princess because she stayed true to who she was. She didn't let them erase her. And look what happened to her, Catherine whispered. William flinched. Those words had struck deep, but they were both thinking it. It wasn't because she was herself, he said quietly. That was because the world wouldn't let her breathe. Took both her hands. I can't make this easy. I wish I could. But I can promise you this. I will be beside you. Every step. And you don't have to become someone else. You just have to become the best version of yourself. Catherine wanted to believe him. But 3 weeks later, she wasn't so sure. The tabloids had started their campaign. Every morning brought new headlines. Her family was to middle class. Her mother had been a flight attendant, not royalty. They printed photos from her university days. Photos at parties. Photos in a bikini. Nothing scandalous. But they wrote about her like she was unworthy. Waity Katie, one headline screamed, because she'd waited 8 years for William to propose. Not princess material, said another. The palace told her to ignore them. Don't read the papers. Don't look at the comments online. But Catherine couldn't help it. Late at night, alone in her room, she scrolled through article after article, each one carving away at her confidence. Who did she think she was? A commoner marrying a prince? Girls like her didn't become queens. Then came the day that almost broke her. Asterisk, asterisk, the charity event was supposed to be simple. Catherine's first official public appearance with William? Shake some hands. Smile for photos. Show the world she could handle the pressure. But the moment she stepped out of the car, everything went wrong. The crowd was massive, bigger than anyone had predicted. Barriers buckled under the weight of people pushing forward. Security scrambled. Cameras pressed in from every angle. The noise was deafening, screaming, shouting. Flashes so bright they left spots in her vision. Catherine froze. Her training vanished. Every lesson Margaret had drilled into her, every carefully practiced smile, gone. She stood there, paralyzed, while the world watched. William was ahead of her, shaking hands, following protocol. He hadn't noticed yet that she'd stopped moving. A woman shoved a phone in Catherine's face. Just one picture? Please. Someone grabbed her arm. My daughter loves you. Sign this. The bodyguard moved between them, but more people pushed forward. Catherine's breath came short and fast. Her vision narrowed. The edges went dark. She was having a panic attack. Right there. In front of thousands of people, in front of every camera in Britain. Then William was there. His hand on her back, steady, warm. Breathe, he whispered. Just for her. Look at me. Just me. Catherine found his eyes. Blue, calm, anchoring her to the moment. We're going to walk together, he said softly. Slow steps. I'm right here. They moved through the crowd as one. William's hand never left her back. He guided her, protected her. And slowly, very slowly, Catherine's breathing steadied. They made it through the event, barely, but they made it in the car afterward. Catherine couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face. She'd ruined everything. The palace would see the footage. The press would tear her apart. She'd proven them all right. She wasn't strong enough for this. Can't do this, she said, voice breaking. William, I can't. He pulled her close. Let her cry into his shoulder. You just did, he said. You kept going. That's all that matters. But Catherine knew better. The next morning's headlines confirmed it. Kate's panic. Is she ready to be princess? Future queen freezes under pressure. William's worried face says it all. She stayed in her room all day. Refused meals. Wouldn't answer calls? Even from William. The palace staff whispered outside her door. She heard them. Concerned voices discussing whether she needed a doctor, a therapist, or whether this engagement had been a terrible mistake. That evening, there was a knock. Not William. Someone else. Catherine. A woman's voice. Older, refined. May I come in? Catherine opened the door. Queen Elizabeth stood in the hallway. The Queen herself. At Catherine's bedroom door, Your Majesty, Catherine started to curtsy, but Elizabeth raised a hand. May we speak? Privately. Catherine stepped aside. The Queen entered, sat in the chair by the window, and for a long moment, said nothing. She just looked at Catherine with those sharp, knowing eyes. Do you know why I'm here? Elizabeth asked finally. Catherine shook her head. Because I remember my first panic attack. I was 19 years old. My father had just become king, which meant someday I would be queen. And I was terrified. Catherine's eyes widened. The Queen? Terrified? They don't tell you that part in the history books, Elizabeth continued. They show the coronation, the crown, the confidence. They don't show the girl who cried herself to sleep, who wondered if she'd destroy the monarchy through her own inadequacy. She leaned forward. But here's what I learned, Catherine. Being royal isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. Again and again. Even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. But I froze today, Catherine whispered. Everyone saw. Yes, they did. Elizabeth's voice was firm. And tomorrow, you'll face them again. And the next day. And the day after that, until one day, you won't freeze anymore. The words should have felt harsh, but somehow they gave Catherine strength. Asterisk, asterisk the next morning. Catherine got out of bed at 6, put on the clothes they'd laid out for her, sat through hair and makeup without complaint. When Margaret arrived for training, Catherine's spine was already straight. Her hands were still. Good, Margaret said. Surprised. Very good. But the real test came 3 days later. Another public appearance. A hospital visit. William would be with her. But Catherine knew the truth now. He couldn't do this for her. No one could. She had to find her own strength. The car pulled up. Cameras waited. But this time, Catherine didn't freeze. She opened the door herself before the bodyguard could. Stepped out. Smiled. Not the practiced smile Margaret had taught her. A real one. Small. Genuine. A little girl in the front row held out flowers. Catherine walked straight to her. Knelt down. Didn't care that her dress touched the wet ground. What's your name? Catherine asked. Emily, the girl whispered, awestruck. These are beautiful, Emily. Did you pick them yourself? The girl nodded. Catherine took the flowers, smelled them, made Emily giggle. The cameras caught every moment. But for once, Catherine didn't care about the cameras. She cared about the little girl whose eyes had lit up. Inside the hospital, Catherine met children fighting cancer, teenagers who'd lost limbs, parents watching their children suffer. And something shifted in her. This wasn't about her anymore. Her fear, her inadequacy, her panic attacks. These people were facing real battles, real pain. And if her presence, even for 5 minutes, could make them smile, then her discomfort meant nothing. A teenage boy in a wheelchair told her he'd been following her story in the news. They're pretty mean to you, he said bluntly. Catherine laughed. Actually laughed. Yeah, they are. You seem nice, though. I don't get why they're so harsh. Catherine knelt beside his wheelchair. Can I tell you a secret? He nodded. I read every single article, every mean comment, and it hurts. Every time. It paused. But you know what? You're braver than I'll ever be. You're fighting for your life. I'm just fighting for my confidence. So if you can be brave, I can too. The boy's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, he whispered. Later, William found her in the hospital corridor. She was crying, but not from fear this time. What happened? He asked, concerned. I think I finally understand, Catherine said, why Diana was so beloved. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being human. About seeing people, really seeing them. William pulled her close. You're going to be amazing, he whispered. You already are. The wedding came faster than Catherine expected. April 29, 2011, Westminster Abbey. 2 billion people watching worldwide. Catherine stood in a private room wearing a dress that weighed more than her fear used to. Her father squeezed her hand. Last chance to run, he joked, but Catherine didn't want to run. Not anymore. She walked down that aisle with her head high, looked into William's eyes, made promises she intended to keep, not because she was perfect, but because she was trying. The titles came. Princess Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, future Queen Consort. The papers finally wrote nice things, called her elegant, poised. A fairy tale come true, but Catherine knew the truth. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was work. Hard, constant, exhausting work. The real challenge started after the honeymoon. Royal duties piled up. Speeches to give. Events to attend. Charities to support. Catherine threw herself into it all. But the panic attacks didn't stop completely. They came at random moments. Before big speeches, during particularly intense scrutiny, she learned to manage them. Breathing techniques, grounding exercises, and William's hand on her back. Always there, always steady. 3 years into marriage, Catherine became pregnant. The press went wild. But this time, she didn't read the articles. Didn't care about their opinions on her pregnancy, weight, or her maternity clothes, or whether she was having a boy or girl. She focused on one thing, being the mother she wanted to be, not the mother they expected. Prince George was born, then Charlotte, then Louis. Catherine became a mother before she truly became comfortable being a princess, and somehow that made all the difference. Asterisk motherhood changed Catherine in ways she never expected. Not softened her, strengthened her, because when photographers tried to get pictures of her children, something fierce awoke inside her. When tabloids printed lies about her parenting, she didn't cry. She fought back, quietly, strategically. But she fought. She launched campaigns for children's mental health, early years development, supporting families. The causes weren't chosen by palace advisors trying to make her look good. They were chosen by a mother who understood struggle. People noticed. The public who'd once called her Weighty Katie started calling her something else. Our Kate, the People's Princess. That title, the one that had belonged to Diana at first, it terrified Catherine. She didn't want to replace Diana. Didn't want to be compared. The woman had died trying to escape this life. How could Catherine possibly fill those shoes? But William helped her understand. You're not replacing my mother, he said one night. They were watching their children sleep. George's arm thrown over Charlotte. Louis snoring softly. You're honoring her. By being yourself, by caring about people the way she did. Then came 2024. The year that changed everything. Catherine found the lump herself. Small, hard, wrong. She didn't tell William right away. Didn't tell anyone. She scheduled a private doctor's appointment. Told herself it was nothing. just a precaution. But deep down, she knew. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Cancer. The word dropped into her life like a bomb. The doctor's voice continued talking. Treatment options, statistics, survival rates. But Catherine couldn't hear anything except her children's laughter from that morning. George asking her to help with homework. Charlotte showing her a drawing. Louis wanting one more story before bed. Would she be there to see them grow up? She told William that night. Watched his face crumble. This strong, composed man who'd lost his mother too young, now facing the possibility of losing his wife. "We'll fight this," he said, voice shaking. "Together. We'll fight." But Catherine knew this was one battle he couldn't fight for her. The palace wanted to hide it. Keep it private. Royal illnesses weren't discussed publicly. But Catherine refused. "People need to know," she said. "Millions of women face this. If I hide, what message does that send? That cancer is shameful? That we should suffer in silence?" So she made a video. Sat in the garden where she'd once cried over her inadequacy, looked directly into the camera, and told the world, "I have cancer." Voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She was terrified, but she didn't show it. Because she'd learned something over 13 years of being a princess, strength isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. The response was overwhelming. Messages from around the world. From cancer survivors, from people who'd lost loved ones, from strangers who just wanted her to know she wasn't alone. The treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy that left her weak, nauseous, bald under the wig she wore for official photos. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, days she cried from pain and exhaustion. But there were also days she played with her children, days she laughed with William, days she felt almost normal. And slowly, month by month, she got stronger. The cancer responded to treatment. Her doctors grew cautiously optimistic. By September, they used a word that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Remission, Catherine had won. Not easily, not without scars. But she'd won. Her first public appearance after treatment was at a children's hospital. The same one she'd visited years ago. Some of the same children were still there. Fighting their own battles, she sat with a teenage girl who'd lost all her hair to chemotherapy. "Does it get easier?" the girl asked, touching her bald head self-consciously. Catherine removed her wig. Right there, in front of everyone, showed her own bare scalp. "Still healing? Still patchy?" "No," Catherine said honestly. "It doesn't get easier, but you get stronger." The photo went viral within hours. Catherine, future Queen of England, bald and beautiful and unashamed. The headlines called her brave, inspiring, a fighter. But Catherine didn't care about headlines anymore. She cared about that girl. And every other person fighting battles the world couldn't see. December 2024. Catherine stood in the same palace corridor where she'd once frozen in fear. Where Margaret had taught her to walk properly, where she'd learned to hold a teacup like royalty. But she wasn't the same woman anymore. Her hair had grown back. Shorter than before, different. She looked at her reflection in the gilded mirror, saw someone she finally recognized. Not the girl from Berkshire, not the frightened fiancé, not even the polished princess they'd tried to create. Someone new. Someone earned. William found her there. After all these years, he still knew where to look when she needed a moment alone. "Ready?" he asked. Tonight was a gala. Her first major public event since announcing her remission. The press was calling it her triumphant return. Catherine called it Tuesday. "I've been thinking," she said, still looking in the mirror, "about that first day. When your father said I needed training, when Margaret circled me like I was a broken thing that needed fixing." William moved beside her, their reflections side by side, and they were right. I did need training. She turned to face him, but not to become someone else, To survive being myself in a world that wanted to change me? She took his hand. You told me once that your mother found her own way, that she became the people's princess by staying true to herself. I didn't understand that. I thought I had to choose. Be myself or be royal. But they're not opposites. No, William agreed softly. They never were. At the gala, Catherine moved through the crowd with a confidence that looked effortless. But she knew the truth. Every smile was a choice. Every conversation was work. Every moment in front of cameras required the strength she'd built through years of panic, attacks and criticism and fear. But now she had something else too. Purpose. A young woman approached nervously. Recently diagnosed with cancer, terrified, Catherine saw herself in those frightened eyes. How did you do it? The woman asked. How did you stay strong? Catherine thought about lying, giving an inspiring answer about courage and determination. But she'd learned that people didn't need perfect princesses. They needed honest ones. I didn't, Catherine said. I fell apart. Multiple times, I cried. I panicked. I wanted to quit. She paused. But I had people who wouldn't let me give up. And eventually, I became someone who wouldn't let myself give up. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for being real. Later, Catherine stood with William on a balcony overlooking London. The city sparkled below them. Millions of lights. Millions of people. Some facing battles, some celebrating victories. All living their complicated, messy, beautiful lives. Do you remember that night in the garden? Catherine asked. When I told you they were trying to change everything about me? I remember. I was right. They did change me, but not the way I thought. She leaned against him. I'm stronger now, braver, more sure of who I am. The girl from Berkshire never could have survived cancer treatment while raising 3 children and fulfilling royal duties. But I could, because of everything this life demanded from me. William kissed the top of her head. My mother would have loved you. I wish I could have known her. You do know her. Every time you hold a child who's scared, every time you speak honestly about struggles, every time you choose compassion over protocol, that's her legacy. And now it's yours too. The next morning, newspapers ran photos from the gala. Catherine in a blue gown, radiant, confident. The headlines called her the new Queen of Hearts. Comparisons to Diana followed, but this time, Catherine didn't flinch from them, because she understood now. She wasn't replacing Diana. She was continuing what Diana had started, showing that royalty could be human, that strength could coexist with vulnerability, that you could wear a crown and still be real. In her office, Catherine worked on her next initiative, a program supporting families affected by cancer. She'd learned through her own journey how isolating illness could be, how much people needed to feel seen, heard, understood. This was her purpose now. Not just cutting ribbons and attending galas, but using her platform to help people who were fighting battles the world couldn't see. George ran into her office, out of breath. Ma'am, Charlotte took my... He stopped, stared at the papers on her desk. What are you working on? He asked, curious. Catherine pulled him onto her lap. Her eldest son? One day, he'd be king. One day, he'd face pressures she couldn't imagine. I'm trying to help people, she said simply. Like how Dad helps people. Yes. Everyone in our family has a job. To serve. To care. To show up for others even when it's hard. George thought about this. Is it hard, being a princess? Catherine could have lied, could have made it sound like a fairy tale. But she'd promised herself she'd always be honest with her children. Sometimes, she said. But hard things are often the most important things. And the people we help make it all worth it. You're the best, Mom. Catherine's eyes stung. Because 13 years ago, she'd wondered if she was strong enough for this life. if she was worthy, if she could survive the pressure and the scrutiny and the impossible expectations. She'd found her answer, not in perfection, not in becoming what they wanted, but in choosing every single day to show up, to be herself, to help others. The girl who'd frozen in panic at her first public event was gone, but she wasn't erased. She was transformed into someone who could freeze in fear and keep walking anyway, who could face cancer and find strength, who could carry Diana's legacy while being completely herself. Catherine Middleton had become the Princess of Wales, and someday she'd be queen. But more than any title, she'd become exactly who the world needed. A woman who'd faced her deepest fears and come out stronger, who'd been broken and rebuilt herself, who'd learned that real royalty wasn't about being perfect, it was about being brave enough to be human.